evening. Business leaders and air passengers are tonight questioning the decision to close Plymouth City Airport. It'll shut by the end of the year after its owner said it was unable to make it financially viable.
It recently lost its last remaining connection to the capital, and passenger numbers have dipped to around 100 a day.
Let's go live to our Plymouth correspondent, Jonathan Gibson, who's at the airport for us now. Jonathan, it's been seen as a big blow for the city's economy, but those holding the purse strings say they didn't have a choice.
Yeah, today the economic reality of trying to operate what is a small city airport came home to roost. Was it a surprise? In a word, no. Even vehement supporters thought this was coming, because when you look at the figures, they simply don't add up. As few as 100 people a day currently depart from Plymouth City Airport. They each pay around £6 through their ticket costs towards its running costs. And do the maths for yourself and you'll soon find out that's nowhere near enough to keep this place running. For all the aeroplanes flying over Plymouth Airport today, there won't be many flying in for much longer. In 6 months' time, the airport will shut amid mounting losses. Sutton Harbour Group has had enough, though it admits today's decision was a difficult one.
It's deeply regrettable, for our staff, for the economy, but nevertheless, people weren't using, and that's what it comes down to. And we've invested heavily in the past. We've set up the airline. I feel we've more than done our bit for this airport. But as I say, we find ourselves in this very difficult situation.
Running an airport comes with it a number of fixed costs. It has to provide air traffic control and fire cover. Neither is cheap, and yet the income is directly dependent on the number of passengers that travel through it. And the reality is, there just aren't enough of them.
It'd be quite devastating for it to go. It's Plymouth's a big area. It's not a small city, so there's a lot of business going in and out of it.
Clearly I'm very disappointed, both from a personal point of view, because I'm a regular user, and also from a pure investment perspective. When you're talking to people about investment in football clubs, they want to know what the nearest airport is, and of course at the moment it's ideal to have the airport here on our doorstep.
Air South West has already moved its engineering facility to Newquay, and last week announced it was moving its operations centre out of Plymouth as well. But it was the decision to stop all flights to London Gatwick which has had the most significant impact on the airport. Sutton Harbour says on average just 100 passengers depart through the airport a day now, and with losses predicted to reach £1 million this year, keeping it open is just not viable. Lothar Berger is the owner of the Plymouth Flying School. Like others, he's shocked, but not really surprised.
Sutton Harbour have shown their cards. We know what's going to happen. Now for the local community to get together and hopefully support the airport for long term, and so we can stay here for a longer period than December, which they've currently told us.
Sentiment not lost on the wider business community.
It does actually enable a proper debate to be held about what is the future of the airport going further forward, and genuinely looking at options which are different from the current configuration.
We've got to find a way of preserving the asset. To have an international city with international businesses and ambition, it's got to have that connectivity to the market.
But finding a way of preserving the airport will be an uphill task, and the clock is already ticking. Jonathan Gibson at Plymouth City Airport for the Westcountry tonight.
Well, Plymouth Airport was officially opened in 1931 by the then Prince of Wales.
David Woodland looks back now at more than 80 years of flight from the city.
Plymouth Airport officially opened in the summer of 1931. Sadly, bad weather meant the guest of honour, the Prince of Wales, had to land elsewhere. It's been stormy going ever since, with a succession of airlines trying to make a go of it. When Churchill flew back from a wartime visit to US President Roosevelt, he bypassed Roborough and landed by flying boat. Others have bypassed Plymouth altogether, and that really has been the airport's problem. Though there have been a series of new starts. This ITV News report from 1969 shows a Westward Airline aircraft taxiing through what appears to be a small swamp.
An Islander aircraft of Westward Airways inaugurating the new midday service serving Plymouth, Gatwick and London Airport.
They were pleased with cabins 60% full and were optimistic.
All their ground hostesses, including those at Gatwick where the airline now has its own desk, have been issued with a new With It uniform. It consists of a white jumper, black leather waistcoat, red miniskirt and black boots, with, for outdoor wear, a black cape with a fur-trimmed hood.
But the Caped Crusaders were not enough, and westward disappeared along with Danair, Celtic and more recently Bryman. The main problem, a short runway, meant bigger aircraft couldn't land, surrounded by housing they couldn't expand, and there weren't enough passengers. David Woodland for the Westcountry Tonight.
Well, let's return live to Jonathan Gibson. Jonathan, is there any indication yet about the future use of the site there?
Well, I think it's important to point out that in the short term, Air South West is committed to maintaining its timetable and schedule from Plymouth for as long as the airport stays in operation. And when it closes, it will continue to operate from Newquay and Bristol airports. As regards the site itself, the freehold's actually owned by Plymouth City Council, and it's already commissioned a feasibility study to see whether this site can be viable in its current form. A little earlier I spoke to the acting chief executive and I asked him, in the worst case scenario, would the council be prepared to come in and run the airport itself?
We will look at all options, and I wouldn't want to predetermine any outcomes of that. But you're right, we are the freeholder, and as part of that we've got a role and responsibility.
So a guarded response, as you can see there, from the City Council. I think particularly in the current economic climate, it would be a brave local authority that would pledge to take on this kind of liability, running as it seems to be at the moment at a loss of around £1 million a year. That said, it has been talking to other operators, it has been talking to other airlines, apparently 16 in total, though I doubt they'll be queuing at the door to take on this liability.
Jonathan Gibson, live at Plymouth Airport. Thank you.
Members of a Nepalese